Close your eyes for a moment. Picture a land where the sun beats down on cracked earth and the air smells like clay and sweat. You can hear the crack of a whip. You can hear voices groaning under loads of brick and mortar that no human body should carry. Hundreds of thousands of men, women, and children. Dark skin glistening under the African sun. Bones aching, backs bent, spirits crushed, but somehow not broken. This is Egypt, and these people, these slaves, are the children of Israel. Now let me ask you something. What would you do if you had been crying out to God for 400 years and heard nothing but silence? What would you do if your grandparents cried out, and their grandparents cried out, and their grandparents before them, and the heavens stayed shut? Would you still believe? Would you still pray? Would you still hold on to a promise made to a man named Abraham so long ago that it sounded more like a legend than a covenant? Because that is exactly where this story begins. Not with power, not with miracles. It begins with the silence before the storm. What you are about to witness is not a Sunday school lesson. This is not a flannel board story for children. This is the book of Exodus, told like you have never seen it before. A full cinematic experience, scene by scene, plague by plague, heartbreak by heartbreak, miracle by miracle. Every frame of this story is in your Bible. And by the time we are finished, you will never read it the same way again. But before the plagues, before Moses, before the burning bush and the parting of the sea, there was a promise. God spoke to Abraham in Genesis chapter 15, verse 13. He told him plainly, "Your descendants will be strangers in a land that is not theirs. They will be enslaved, they will be afflicted for 400 years, but I will judge the nation they serve, and afterward they shall come out with great possessions." 400 years. God gave Abraham the whole blueprint. The suffering was not an accident. The bondage was not because God forgot. It was part of a plan so vast that it would take centuries to unfold. And the clock, beloved, that clock was ticking. Every crack of the whip brought them one day closer to deliverance. Every tear shed in the mud pits of Egypt was counted. Stay with me. Do not go anywhere. Because this story is about to explode in ways you did not see coming. Egypt was the most powerful civilization on the face of the earth. The pyramids were already ancient. The Nile fed millions. The armies were unmatched. And at the top of all that power sat Pharaoh, a man who believed he was a god. But there was a problem growing in the land of Goshen. The Hebrew slaves were multiplying. Exodus chapter 1 verse 12 tells us that the more the Egyptians oppressed them, the more they multiplied and spread. Pharaoh looked at those numbers and he was afraid, not of their armies. They had no armies. He was afraid of their wombs. He was afraid of their children. He was afraid that a nation was being born inside his own borders. So he gave an order that still echoes through history. Every son born to the Hebrews, throw him into the Nile. Let the river swallow them. Let the crocodiles do the work. Every baby boy gone. Think about that. Imagine the mothers hiding their newborns in the dark, pressing their hands over tiny mouths to muffle the crying. Imagine the fathers, helpless, watching soldiers go door to door. This was not just slavery. This was genocide. But there was one mother who refused to let the river take her son. Her name was Jochebed, from the tribe of Levi. Exodus chapter 2 tells us she hid her baby boy for 3 months. 3 months of terror. 3 months of muffled cries and midnight feedings and praying that no neighbor would hear, that no soldier would come. But a baby grows. A baby gets louder, and she knew she could not hide him forever. So she did something that looks like surrender, but was actually the boldest act of faith in the entire Old Testament. She took a basket made of papyrus. She waterproofed it with tar and pitch. She placed her baby inside and set him among the reeds along the bank of the Nile. The same river Pharaoh had turned into a graveyard, she turned into a cradle, and she sent her daughter Miriam to stand at a distance and watch. Now picture this, the basket floating gently on the water, the morning light catching the surface of the Nile, the reeds swaying, and then a sound, voices, laughter. Pharaoh's daughter coming down to bathe with her attendants. She sees the basket, she opens it, and there is a baby crying. Exodus chapter 2 verse 6 says she felt sorry for him. She knew immediately, this is one of the Hebrew children. She knew this child was supposed to be dead, but she reached in and picked him up anyway. Let me show you the irony here. Pharaoh ordered every Hebrew boy thrown into the river, and from that very river, Pharaoh's own daughter pulled out the man who would destroy his kingdom. God has a sense of timing that will shake you to your core. Miriam steps forward, bold as brass. She asks Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I find a Hebrew woman to nurse the child for you?" And who does she bring? The baby's own mother. Jochebed gets paid by the palace to raise her own son. The boy grows up in Pharaoh's house. He eats from Pharaoh's table. He wears Egyptian linen. He learns to read hieroglyphics, to command soldiers, to navigate the corridors of power. They give him an Egyptian name, Moses, drawn out of the water. But Moses was living in two worlds, 1 foot in the palace, 1 foot in the mud. He had the education of a prince and the blood of a slave. And somewhere deep inside, he knew he did not belong in that throne room. Hebrews chapter 11 verse 24 tells us that when Moses grew up, he refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He chose to suffer with the people of God rather than enjoy the passing pleasures of sin. That is not a small decision. He walked away from wealth, from status, from everything the world says matters. One day, Moses went out to where his people were laboring. He saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew slave. Something broke inside him. He looked left, he looked right. No one was watching, and he killed the Egyptian and buried him in the sand. The next day, he went out again and saw 2 Hebrews fighting. He tried to intervene, and one of them said, "Who made you a ruler over us? Are you going to kill me like you killed the Egyptian?" Moses was exposed. The word reached Pharaoh, and the prince of Egypt became the most wanted man in the kingdom. He ran all the way to Midian, a foreign land. We found a well, defended some shepherd's daughters, and married one of them, Zipporah, the daughter of Jethro. And for 40 years, the man who had been raised in a palace tended sheep in the wilderness. 40 years of nothing, 40 years of silence. If this were a movie, you would think the story was over. The hero failed. The mission collapsed. Roll the credits. But God does not waste deserts. Moses needed those 40 years. He needed to unlearn Egypt. He needed to learn humility. He needed to learn the terrain he would later lead 2 million people through. Everything God puts you through has a purpose, even when it feels like exile. Then one day, on the backside of the desert, near a mountain called Horeb, Moses saw something that made no sense. A bush on fire, burning, flames dancing. But the bush was not consumed. It did not turn to ash. It just burned and burned and burned. He said, "I must turn aside and see this great sight." Why does the bush not burn up?" And then a voice from inside the fire, "Moses, Moses." He answered, "Here I am." God said, "Do not come any closer. Take off your sandals. The ground you are standing on is holy." Then came the words that changed everything. "I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. I have seen the affliction of my people in Egypt. I have heard their cry. I know their suffering, and I have come down to deliver them." God told Moses to go back to Egypt. Go back to the place that wants to kill you. Stand before the most powerful ruler on earth and tell him to let my people go. Moses resisted. He said, "Who am I to go to Pharaoh?" God said, "I will be with you." Moses said, "What if they ask your name?" God answered with the most powerful declaration in Scripture, Exodus chapter 3, verse 14. "I am W-I-am. Tell them, I am sent you." Moses still hesitated. He said, "I am slow of speech. I am not eloquent." God's anger burned against him, but even then, grace prevailed. He gave Moses his brother Aaron as a mouthpiece. He gave him signs, a rod that becomes a serpent, a hand that turns leprous and is restored, and a final promise. "When you bring the people out of Egypt, you shall serve God on this very mountain." The shepherd picked up his staff. The exile turned his face toward Egypt. And the most dangerous man Pharaoh would ever meet was walking home. Moses and Aaron walked into the throne room of Pharaoh. "Let me paint this for you so you can see it." The hall stretched out before them like a canyon of gold and polished stone. Pillars rose on either side, carved with images of gods and conquests. Incense hung thick in the air, blue smoke curling up toward ceilings painted with stars. Guards lined the walls, spears gleaming, faces like granite. At the far end sat Pharaoh on a throne that made the sun look modest. Gold on gold on gold, and around him, priests, advisors, magicians, the most powerful men in the most powerful empire on earth. Into this walked two old men, no army behind them, no weapons, no political connections, just a wooden staff and a message from a God that Pharaoh had never heard of. Moses spoke. "Thus says the Lord God of Israel, let my people go, that they may hold a feast to me in the wilderness." Pharaoh's response was immediate and cold. Exodus chapter 5, verse 2. "Who is the Lord, that I should obey his voice, to let Israel go? I do not know the Lord, and I will not let Israel go." Not only did Pharaoh refuse, he punished the request. He ordered the taskmasters to stop providing straw for bricks. The Hebrew slaves would now gather their own straw and still meet the same quota. The workload doubled. The beatings increased. The Hebrew foreman came to Moses and Aaron with fury in their eyes. "You have made us a stench in the sight of Pharaoh. You have put a sword in their hand to kill us." Moses went back to God, broken. "Lord, why have you brought trouble on this people? Since I came to Pharaoh to speak in your name, he has done evil to this people, and you have not delivered them at all." That is raw, that is honest. Have you ever prayed for deliverance and watched things get worse? Have you ever stepped out in faith and felt like God set you up to fail? Moses was standing in that exact place. The man who left behind a quiet life in Midian, who argued with God at the burning bush, who finally said yes, and now the people he came to save wanted him gone. That is the cost of obedience. Sometimes it gets darker before the dawn. And God's answer was not an explanation. It was not a list of reasons. It was 5 words that carried the weight of heaven. Now you shall see what I will do to Pharaoh, not what Moses would do, not what the people would do, what God himself would do. The battle was never between Moses and Pharaoh. It was between the God of Abraham and the gods of Egypt. And that battle was about to begin. The confrontation began in earnest. Moses and Aaron returned to Pharaoh's court. Aaron threw his rod on the ground and it became a serpent. Not a trick, not an illusion, a living, writhing serpent on the palace floor. Pharaoh called his magicians, Jans and Jambres, according to tradition. They threw their rods down, and their rods became serpents too. For a moment, it looked like a draw, Egyptian magic versus Hebrew God. And then Aaron's serpent opened its jaws and swallowed every one of their serpents whole. Let me show you what was happening. Egypt's religion was built on the serpent. The uraeus, the cobra on Pharaoh's crown, symbolized his divine authority. Aaron's serpent, consuming the Egyptian serpents, was not just a magic trick. It was a declaration of war against the gods of Egypt. Your symbols of power are food for my God. But Pharaoh's heart was hardened. He would not listen. Then came the first plague, Exodus chapter 7, verse 20. Moses stretched out his rod and struck the water of the Nile. Every drop turned to blood. Not metaphorical, not red algae, blood. The fish died. The river stank. The water that fed the entire civilization of Egypt became undrinkable. For 7 days the Nile ran red. Now understand what this meant. The Nile was not just a river, it was a god. The Egyptians worshipped Hapi, the god of the Nile, the source of all life and fertility. God turned their god into death. He struck the object of their worship and showed them it had no power to save itself, much less save them. Pharaoh's magicians replicated the blood with their enchantments, which always makes me wonder. The entire river is already blood, and the best they could do was make more blood. They could match the curse, but could not reverse it. That is the difference between imitation and authority. The magicians could copy the sign, but they could not undo it. They could show you darkness, but they could not bring you light. And that pattern would repeat itself plague after plague, until even the magicians themselves would break. Pharaoh turned his back and went into his house, his heart unmoved. The people of Egypt dug along the banks of the Nile, searching for drinkable water. 7 days of blood, 7 days of death in the river that was supposed to be their source of life. 7 days later, the second plague, frogs. Frogs everywhere, coming up from the Nile, the canals, the pools. This frogs in the ovens, frogs in the bedrooms, frogs in the bedrooms, on the beds, in the sheets. Exodus chapter 8 verse 3. Now the Egyptians revered Heket, the frog goddess of fertility. God took their goddess and made her a plague. Imagine opening your bread oven and finding it crawling with frogs. The magicians could produce more frogs, but again, they could not remove them. Pharaoh begged Moses to pray for relief and promised to let the people go. Moses prayed. The frogs died. They piled them in heaps and the land stank. And the moment the frogs were gone, Pharaoh went back on his word. The third plague came without warning. Aaron struck the dust of the earth, and gnats rose up in swarms. Tiny, biting, maddening clouds of gnats covering every person and every animal in Egypt. This time the magicians could not replicate it. They tried and failed, and they said to Pharaoh in Exodus chapter 8, verse 19, "This is the finger of God." Even Pharaoh's own sorcerers admitted they were outmatched. But Pharaoh's heart was hard. He would not listen. The fourth plague, swarms of flies. But here is where something extraordinary happens. God makes a distinction. Exodus chapter 8, verse 22. He says, "I will set apart the land of Goshen, where my people dwell, so that no swarms of flies shall be there." The flies covered Egypt, thick in every house, corrupting the land. But Goshen was untouched, clean, protected. God drew a line through the middle of the nation. On one side, judgment. On the other side, mercy. And every Egyptian could see the difference. Now, here is something you need to understand about what God was doing. This was not random punishment. Each plague was a direct assault on a specific Egyptian deity. The Nile turned to blood, judgment on Hapi. The frogs, judgment on Heket. The gnats from the dust, judgment on Geb, the earth god. The flies, judgment on Khepri, the scarab god. God was systematically dismantling the entire religious system of Egypt. He was saying to every Egyptian priest, every temple, every carved image, "You are nothing. Your gods cannot protect you. Your gods cannot protect themselves." 4 plagues, 4 demonstrations of power, 4 gods of Egypt humiliated. And Pharaoh sat on his golden throne, watching his world crumble, and still said no. The man who asked, "Who is the Lord?" was about to find out in ways he never imagined. Stay with me, because the plagues are about to get worse, much worse. And what God does next will shake the foundations of the most powerful empire on earth. The 5th plague struck without mercy. God sent a severe pestilence on all the livestock of Egypt. Horses, donkeys, camels, cattle, sheep, every animal in the fields. They began to stagger. They began to collapse. By the thousands, the livestock of Egypt fell dead in the pastures. The economy of the entire nation was tied to those animals. Transportation, agriculture, trade, military power. God was not just sending plagues, he was dismantling the infrastructure of an empire. Apis, the sacred bull god of Egypt, worshipped in temples from Memphis to Thebes, could do nothing. The bulls that Egyptians bowed before were dying in the dirt. But here is the part that should make your hair stand up. Exodus chapter 9, verse 4. The Lord will make a distinction between the livestock of Israel and the livestock of Egypt, and nothing that belongs to the children of Israel shall die. Nothing. Not one cow, not one goat, not one donkey. Pharaoh sent investigators to Goshen, and they came back with the report. Not a single animal belonging to the Hebrews had died. Think about that. 2 peoples living in the same country, under the same sun, breathing the same air. On one side, death. On the other side, life. If that does not tell you something about the hand of God, nothing will. And still, Pharaoh's heart was hardened. The 6th plague came next, and this one was personal. God told Moses and Aaron to take handfuls of soot from a furnace and throw it into the air in Pharaoh's presence. When they did, it became fine dust that spread over all the land of Egypt, and wherever it settled on human skin, boils broke out. Painful, festering, open sores covering the bodies of every Egyptian, from the servants to the officials to the magicians themselves. Exodus chapter 9 verse 11 tells us that the magicians could not stand before Moses because of the boils, for the boils were on the magicians and on all the Egyptians. Let that settle in. The men who had been matching Moses sign for sign, the men who turned their rods into serpents and water into blood, were now covered in sores, writhing on the floor, unable to even stand in the same room as the prophet of God. Their power was broken. Their bodies were broken. The god, Isis, whom the Egyptians believed was the goddess of healing and medicine, could not heal her own priests. Every layer of Egyptian religion was being stripped away, layer by layer, god by god. Now the seventh plague, and this one looked like the end of the world. God told Moses to stretch his hand toward the sky, and the Lord sent thunder and hail and fire that ran along the ground. Exodus chapter 9, verse 24. There was hail and fire mingled with the hail, so very grievous, such as had not been in all the land of Egypt, since it became a nation. Picture this: ice falling from the sky in a desert country where hail was almost unheard of. But this was not just ice. Fire was mixed in with it. Lightning striking the ground, flames running through the fields. Every tree in the open was shattered. Every crop in the field was beaten flat. Every person and animal caught outside was killed. The servants of Pharaoh, who had begun to fear the word of the Lord, brought their livestock inside before the storm hit. But those who disregarded the warning left their animals and servants in the field, and they died. Even within Egypt, the lines were being drawn: believe and live, ignore and perish. And once again, Goshen was spared. Not a single hailstone fell on the land of the Hebrews. Not the sky goddess, protector of the earth from the forces above, was powerless. The sky itself obeyed the god of the slaves. Pharaoh called for Moses in a panic. Exodus chapter 9, verse 27. I have sinned this time. The Lord is righteous, and I and my people are wicked. Pray to the Lord, for there has been enough of this mighty thunder and hail. I will let you go. Moses prayed. The hail stopped, and like clockwork, the moment the danger passed, Pharaoh hardened his heart once more. The eighth plague. God told Moses to stretch his hand over the land, and an east wind blew all that day and all that night. When morning came, the wind brought locusts, not a few, not a swarm, a living blanket that covered the face of the earth so that the ground could not be seen. Exodus chapter 10, verse 15. They ate every plant the hail had left, every fruit on every tree, every blade of grass. When the locusts were finished, there was nothing green in all the land of Egypt. Nothing. Before the locusts came, Pharaoh's own officials had begged him. Exodus chapter 10, verse 7. How long shall this man be a snare to us? Let the men go, that they may serve the Lord their God. Do you not yet realize that Egypt is destroyed? His own cabinet was turning against him. His own advisors could see what his pride could not. But Pharaoh tried to negotiate. He said, the men could go, but the women and children must stay. Moses refused. God was not asking for a compromise. He was demanding complete liberation. After the locusts, Pharaoh summoned Moses again. He confessed his sin again. He begged for relief again. God sent a strong west wind that carried every locust into the Red Sea. Not one remained. And Pharaoh hardened his heart again. The ninth plague. No warning this time. God told Moses to stretch his hand toward heaven, and a darkness fell over Egypt that was unlike anything any human being had ever experienced. Exodus chapter 10, verse 22. There was thick darkness in all the land of Egypt for 3 days. They did not see one another, nor did anyone rise from his place for 3 days. This was not nighttime. This was not an eclipse. This was a darkness so heavy, so oppressive, that the text says you could feel it. People sat frozen in their homes for 72 hours, unable to see their own hand in front of their face, unable to move, unable to function. Egypt, the land of Ra, the sun god. But Du, the most powerful deity in the Egyptian pantheon, was plunged into complete and total darkness. Ra was defeated. The sun itself was extinguished. But in Goshen, where the children of Israel lived, there was light. Exodus chapter 10, verse 23. All the children of Israel had light in their dwellings. 2 million people living under the same sky as the Egyptians, and their homes had light, while Egypt sat in blackness. If you do not see the hand of God in that distinction, I do not know what more to show you. God was making it plain. These are my people. Touch them, and you touch me. Pharaoh called Moses one last time during the darkness. Go, serve the Lord, he said. Your families can go with you, but leave your livestock behind. Moses said no, not a hoof shall be left behind. Every animal goes with us. Pharaoh erupted. Get out of my sight. The day you see my face again, you will die. And Moses answered calmly, You have spoken well. I will never see your face again. 9 plagues, 9 direct strikes against the gods, the economy, the agriculture, the military, and the very sky of Egypt. And in Goshen, not a fly, not a boil, not a hailstone, not a locust, not a shadow of darkness. God was making his case before the entire world. He was proving in real time, plague by plague, that there is only one God, and that God keeps his promises. If this story is hitting you differently right now, drop a comment below. Tell me which plague you never understood until today. Share this video with someone who has only ever heard the children's version of Exodus. Because what comes next is the most devastating night in the history of the ancient world. And you need to be ready for it. 9 plagues had fallen on Egypt, and Pharaoh still would not break. His rivers had turned to blood. His livestock lay dead. His people were covered in sores. His crops were devoured. His sky had gone dark. And still, that man sat on his throne and said no. But God had one more plague in reserve, and this one would end it. God spoke to Moses. Exodus chapter 11, verse 4. About midnight I will go out through Egypt, and every firstborn in the land of Egypt shall die. From the firstborn of Pharaoh, who sits on his throne, to the firstborn of the slave girl who is behind the mill, and all the firstborn of the livestock. There shall be a great cry throughout the whole land of Egypt, such as has never been nor ever shall be again. Let those words settle over you. Every firstborn, the heir to the throne, the son of the baker, the child of the potter, the baby sleeping in the arms of the washerwoman, the young soldier polishing his armor, the boy learning his father's trade. From the highest to the lowest, death would visit every Egyptian household without exception. This was not random violence. This was not cruelty for its own sake. This was the final reckoning for a nation that had built its power on the blood of innocents. Remember what Pharaoh did. He ordered every Hebrew baby boy thrown into the Nile. He turned the river into a grave for children. He murdered a generation of sons, and now the sons of Egypt would fall. What a man sows, he reaps. What a nation sows, it reaps. And 400 years of innocent blood was calling out from the ground. But God made a way of escape for his people, and the instructions were precise. Exodus chapter 12. On the 10th day of the month, every household was to select a lamb. Not just any lamb, a male, 1-year-old without blemish, without spot, without defect. They were to keep it for 4 days. 4 days living with that lamb. 4 days watching it. 4 days knowing what was coming. On the 14th day, at twilight, the whole assembly of Israel would slaughter their lambs. Then came the instruction that would define a people forever. Take the blood, take a branch of hyssop, dip it in the blood, and strike the lintel and the 2 doorposts of your house. The blood on the top, the blood on the sides. And when I see the blood, I will pass over you, and the plague shall not be upon you to destroy you. Exodus chapter 12, verse 13. Picture the scene that evening. The sun going down over Goshen. Families huddled inside their homes. The fire crackling beneath the spit where the lamb roasted whole. Not a bone of it was to be broken. God was specific about that. The smell of roasting meat filling the house, mixing with the sharp bite of bitter herbs on the table. Herbs meant to remind them of the bitterness of 4 centuries of slavery. Unleavened bread, because there would be no time for dough to rise. Everything about this meal said the same thing. Hurry, be ready. Deliverance is at the door. They ate standing up, sandals on their feet, staffs in their hands, cloaks tucked into their belts. Children watched their parents' faces and understood that something enormous was happening. The elders remembered the stories their grandparents told them, stories about a God who made promises to Abraham. A God who said he would come back for them. Tonight was the night. This was not a casual dinner. This was the last meal of slavery. This was a meal eaten on the edge of freedom. Outside, the blood glistened on the door frames in the last light of day. Every door in Goshen marked with the blood of a lamb. Inside, parents held their children close. They told them what God had promised. They told them what God had done. 9 plagues had proven that the God of Abraham was real, that he was powerful, that he saw them, and now the 10th plague would prove that he was faithful. Midnight came, and with it, silence. A silence so deep it felt like the world was holding its breath. And then the destroyer moved through the land. The Bible does not describe what it looked like. It does not tell us if there was a shadow or a wind or a presence. It only tells us what it did. Every firstborn in Egypt fell. In one moment, one terrible, irreversible moment, the screams began in the darkness. From Pharaoh's palace, where his own son lay dead in his arms, from the houses of the nobles, from the huts of the poor, from the dungeon where even the prisoners lost their firstborn. Exodus chapter 12, verse 30. There was not a house where someone was not dead. Imagine that sound. A nation of millions, screaming in the dark, holding their dead children, their dead brothers, their dead fathers, the greatest empire on earth, brought to its knees in a single night. But in Goshen, every door marked with blood stood untouched. The destroyer passed over. Every Hebrew firstborn was alive. Every family was whole. The blood of the Lamb had made the difference between life and death. Think about that for a moment. It was not the goodness of the people inside that saved them. It was not their righteousness or their prayers alone. It was the blood on the door, the blood of an innocent lamb, shed in the place of the firstborn. If you understand what that means and where that points, then you already know this story is bigger than Egypt. This story stretches all the way forward through time to another lamb, another sacrifice, another door marked with blood. But we will let that truth sit in your spirit as we keep moving. Pharaoh did not wait for morning. He summoned Moses and Aaron in the middle of the night. Exodus chapter 12, verse 31. Rise up, get out from among my people, both you and the children of Israel. Go, serve the Lord as you have said. Take your flocks and your herds, as you have said, and be gone. And bless me also. That last part, bless me also. The man who said he did not know the Lord was now begging for a blessing from the Lord's servants. Pride does not survive the death of a son. The Egyptians were urgent with the people, hurrying them out of the land. They said, "We shall all be dead." And the children of Israel did what God had told Moses they would do back at the burning bush. They asked the Egyptians for articles of silver and gold and clothing. And the Lord gave the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, so that they gave them what they asked. Exodus chapter 12, verse 36. They plundered Egypt, not by the sword, not by force, by the favor of God. 430 years of unpaid wages collected in a single night. The slaves walked out richer than they came in. The people who had nothing now carried the wealth of the greatest empire on earth. God keeps receipts. God pays debts. And when he settles the account, the interest is divine. And then they moved. 600,000 men on foot, besides women and children. A mixed multitude went with them as well. Egyptians who had seen the power of the Hebrew God and chose to follow. Flocks and herds, a very great number of livestock. This was not a quiet departure. This was a nation being born, rising out of the dust of slavery, walking into the desert with nothing but the promise of God and the gold of their former masters on their backs. Exodus chapter 12 verse 41 says that on that very day all the hosts of the Lord went out from the land of Egypt. On that very day, not a day early, not a day late, 430 years to the day. God's timing is not our timing, but it is never wrong. He had told Abraham exactly how long this would take, and to the day, the promise was fulfilled. The Exodus had begun, and the world would never be the same. The children of Israel were free. For the first time in 430 years, no one was telling them where to go, how much to carry, how many bricks to make. They walked out of Egypt under an open sky with the weight of chains falling from their shoulders. But freedom does not come with a map, and the road ahead was anything but simple. God did not lead them by the shortest route. The way of the Philistines ran along the coast, a well-traveled road straight to Canaan. But Exodus chapter 13 verse 17 tells us that God said, "Lest the people change their minds when they see war and return to Egypt." He knew them. He knew they were not ready for battle, not yet. So he led them the long way around, through the wilderness, toward the Red Sea, and he led them personally. A pillar of cloud by day to guide them, a pillar of fire by night to light their path. The presence of God, visible, tangible, walking ahead of his people, like a general at the head of his army. But behind them, something was stirring. Back in Egypt, the grief was giving way to rage. Pharaoh woke up from his sorrow and realized what he had done. He had released his entire labor force. The slaves who built his cities, maintained his temples, worked his fields, were walking away, and his advisors were furious. Exodus chapter 14 verse 5. What is this we have done, that we have let Israel go from serving us? Pharaoh made his decision. He would bring them back. He assembled 600 of his best chariots, plus every other chariot in Egypt, each one carrying a captain. This was not a patrol. This was the full military might of the Egyptian empire, mobilized for one purpose: to recapture the slaves. The thunder of hooves and wheels on the desert floor, the dust rising in clouds behind an army designed for one thing: speed and destruction. The Israelites had made camp by the sea, Pi Haroth, between Migdol and the sea, in front of Baal Zephon. They had nowhere to go. The sea stretched out in front of them, vast and uncrossable. Mountains hemmed them in on either side, and now, behind them, the ground was shaking with the approach of 600 chariots. They were boxed in, trapped, and when they lifted their eyes and saw the Egyptian army coming toward them, dust clouds filling the horizon, chariots gleaming in the sun, the spears glinting like stars, terror seized them. Mothers grabbed their children, old men fell to their knees. The entire camp erupted in panic. They cried out to the Lord, and then they turned on Moses. Exodus chapter 14 verses 11 and 12. Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you have taken us away to die in the wilderness? What have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt? Did we not say to you in Egypt, leave us alone that we may serve the Egyptians? For it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness. Let me be honest with you. That is the voice of fear, and every person watching this has heard it in their own head. The voice that says, go back. The voice that says, at least slavery was predictable. The voice that says freedom is too dangerous, too uncertain, too hard. The Israelites had seen 9 plagues. They had watched God break Egypt piece by piece. They had walked out with gold on their backs, and the moment they saw chariots on the horizon, they forgot everything. Moses answered with words that have echoed through centuries. Exodus chapter 14 verse 13. Do not be afraid. Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will accomplish for you today. For the Egyptians, whom you see today, you shall see again no more forever. The Lord will fight for you, and you shall hold your peace. Stand still in the face of an army. Stand still, with the sea at your back and death coming from the front. Stand still. Do not run. Do not fight. Do not negotiate. Just stand and watch what God does. But then God said something unexpected. He said to Moses, "Why do you cry to me? Tell the children of Israel to go forward. Lift up your rod and stretch your hand over the sea and divide it." There is a time to pray, and there is a time to move. This was the time to move. The angel of God, who had been traveling in front of the Israelites, moved behind them. The pillar of cloud shifted from the front to the rear, positioning itself between the camp of Israel and the camp of Egypt. All night long, the cloud brought darkness to the Egyptian side and light to the Israelite side. Neither army could approach the other. God had set a wall between his people and their enemy, and Moses stretched out his hand over the sea. What happened next is one of the most extraordinary events in the history of the world. The Lord drove the sea back by a strong east wind all that night, and made the sea dry land, and the waters were divided. Exodus chapter 14 verse 21. All night that wind howled, all night the water pulled back, slowly at first, then faster, like curtains being drawn in a theater. Walls of water rising on the left, walls of water rising on the right, and between them, dry ground. Not marsh, not soft sand that would swallow a cartwheel. Dry ground, firm enough for 2 million people to walk on. Wide enough for families with children, for elderly men and women leaning on their staffs, for flocks of sheep and herds of cattle loaded with Egyptian gold. The sea floor became a highway, the impossible became a road, and every step they took was a step that defied every law of nature, every expectation of the world, every calculation Pharaoh had made when he sent his army after them. Imagine standing at the edge of that path. Walls of water towering above you on both sides. You can see fish swimming in those walls. You can hear the deep rumble of the ocean being held in place by nothing but the word of God. the wind in your face, the dry ground beneath your sandals, your children clinging to your hands. And behind you, on the far shore, the fires of the Egyptian army, waiting. The Israelites walked through the sea on dry ground, every last one of them. The old and the young, the strong and the weak, the faithful and the afraid. They all crossed over, from slavery to freedom, from death to life, from Egypt to the other side. And then Pharaoh gave the order, "Follow them in." The chariots rolled onto the seabed. 600 of Egypt's finest war machines thundering into the corridor between the walls of water. They were so consumed with rage, so blinded by pride, that they drove straight into the trap. The same path that had been firm and dry under the feet of the Israelites began to shift under the weight of Egyptian iron. And God looked down from the pillar of fire and cloud and threw the Egyptian army into confusion. Chariot wheels locked, axles snapped, horses stumbled and reared. The most disciplined fighting force in the known world was falling apart on the floor of the sea. And in that moment of chaos, the Egyptians finally understood. Exodus chapter 14, verse 25. "Let us flee from the face of Israel, for the Lord fights for them against the Egyptians." But it was too late to run. The walls were coming down. The water that had stood like glass was now trembling, leaning, ready to fall. And on the far shore, 2 million free people watched the last act of God's judgment unfold before their eyes. The Lord told Moses to stretch his hand over the sea, and Moses obeyed. He lifted that same rod that had turned into a serpent in Pharaoh's court, the same rod that had struck the Nile and turned it to blood, the same rod that had split the sea in the first place. He stretched it out toward the water, and the walls collapsed. The sea came crashing back with a force that no human being could have survived. Thousands of tons of water slamming together from both sides like the jaws of God closing shut. The sound alone must have been enough to stop your heart, a roar deeper than thunder. A collision of water that shook the earth beneath the feet of everyone standing on the far shore. Chariots flipped like toys. Horses screamed and disappeared beneath the waves. Soldiers in bronze armor, the finest warriors Egypt could produce, sank like stones into the deep. The wheels that had thundered across the seabed moments earlier were spinning in the current. The flags of Pharaoh's army vanished beneath the foam. Exodus chapter 14 verse 28. The waters returned and covered the chariots, the horsemen, and all the army of Pharaoh that had followed them into the sea. Not so much as one of them remained. Not one. Let that number land. Let that number land. Not one Egyptian soldier made it back to shore. The mightiest military force the ancient world had ever known. The same army that had conquered nations and held an empire together for centuries, wiped out in minutes. The same sea that had been a highway for the slaves became a grave for their oppressors. The same water that parted in obedience to the rod of Moses closed in obedience to the same command. And on the eastern shore, the children of Israel stood and watched. They saw the bodies washing up on the sand. They saw the broken chariots and the lifeless horses. They saw the armor of the soldiers who had chased them glinting in the morning light, empty and still. Exodus chapter 14 verse 31. Israel saw the great work which the Lord had done in Egypt. The people feared the Lord and believed the Lord and his servant Moses. Think about what just happened. Yesterday, these people were screaming at Moses, telling him they should have stayed in Egypt. Yesterday, they were ready to surrender their freedom and crawl back to the brick pits. Yesterday, they cursed the man God sent to deliver them. And today, they were standing on the far side of an impossible miracle, watching the evidence of God's power wash up at their feet. The very army they feared was now floating face down in the surf. The very chariots that made the ground shake were shattered timber in the current. That is how fast everything can change when God moves. In one night, slaves become free. In one moment, the sea opens. In one morning, an entire army is gone. Do not ever tell me that God cannot turn your situation around. He can do it before the sun comes up. And then came the song. The first recorded worship song in the Bible. Moses opened his mouth and sang. Exodus chapter 15. I will sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. The horse and its rider he has thrown into the sea. The Lord is my strength and my song, and he has become my salvation. This is my God, and I will praise him. My father's God, and I will exalt him. The Lord is a warrior. The Lord is his name. This was not a hymn hummed quietly in a pew. This was not a choir performance with sheet music and practiced harmony. This was a victory roar from the chest of a man who had just watched God destroy an army with water. Every line dripped with awe. Every word shook with the weight of what they had just witnessed. Moses sang about the depths covering the enemy like stone. He sang about God's right hand, glorious in power, shattering the foe into pieces. He sang about the nations trembling when they heard what God had done. The peoples of Philistia, Edom, Moab, and Canaan would hear this story, and their courage would melt. The God of the slaves had defeated the God of the empire, and the whole ancient world was about to find out. And then Miriam. The same Miriam who had watched over baby Moses in the basket on the Nile. Now she was a prophet. Now she was an old woman with fire in her eyes and a tambourine in her hand. Exodus chapter 15, verse 20. Miriam the prophetess, the sister of Aaron, took a tambourine in her hand. And all the women went out after her with tambourines and with dances. And Miriam sang to them, Sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. The horse and its rider he has thrown into the sea. Can you see it? Thousands of women dancing on the shore of the Red Sea. Tambourines rattling like holy thunder. Voices lifted so high the angels must have stopped to listen. Feet stomping on the sand that minutes before had been a battlefield. Old women who had bent their backs under Egyptian whips were now bending their knees in praise. Young mothers who had feared for their children's lives were now spinning and shouting with tears streaming down their faces. This was not polite worship. This was not a quiet prayer circle. This was the explosion of a people who had been silenced for 4 centuries and finally had something to shout about. They danced with every muscle. They sang with every breath. They praised with the kind of ferocity that only the truly liberated can understand. If you have ever come through something that should have destroyed you, if you have ever watched God close a door on the enemy that was chasing you, if you've ever stood on the other side of an impossible situation and realized that you were still alive, still standing, still breathing, then you know what that shore felt like. You know what that song meant. Your ancestors knew this song. Not the words, but the melody. The melody of a people delivered from bondage. The melody of chains hitting the floor. The melody of a God who does not forget his children no matter how long the night lasts. It was not just praise, it was proof. Proof that the God who promised Abraham 400 years earlier had kept his word down to the very day. Proof that no Pharaoh, no army, no empire, no system of oppression is stronger than the hand of God. Proof that when heaven moves on your behalf, nothing on earth can stand in the way. Let that sit with you, let it settle deep in your spirit. Because this story is not over. The sea has closed, but the journey has just begun. And what happens next on the road to Sinai will test everything they just celebrated. 3 days after the Red Sea miracle, the people were thirsty. 3 days. That is all it took for the singing to stop and the complaining to start. They arrived at a place called Marah and found water, but it was bitter, undrinkable. The people grumbled against Moses. "What shall we drink?" Moses cried out to the Lord, and God showed him a tree. He threw it into the water, and the water became sweet. Exodus chapter 15, verse 25. A tree that heals bitter water. Hold that image. Then they came to Elim, where there were 12 springs and 70 palm trees. 12 springs for 12 tribes. Rest. Shade. Cold water. God was not just leading them through the desert. He was teaching them to depend on Him at every step. When they were hungry, He sent manna from heaven. Exodus chapter 16. Every morning the ground was covered with a fine, flaky substance, white as coriander seed, sweet as honey wafers. They had never seen anything like it. They said to each other, "What is it?" In Hebrew, man, hu, manna. What is it? That became its name, the bread from heaven that appeared every morning like frost and melted in the heat of the day. God told them to gather only what they needed for one day. No hoarding, no stockpiling. Those who gathered too much found it full of worms by morning. But on the 6th day they could gather double, because the 7th day was the Sabbath. Rest. Even in the wilderness, God was building rhythm into their lives. Trust me today, I will provide tomorrow. Trust me today, I will provide tomorrow. Day after day, for 40 years. In the evening, quail covered the camp. Birds falling from the sky in numbers, too large to count. Meat for dinner, bread in the morning, water from a rock. Because at Rephidim, where there was no water at all, God told Moses to strike the rock at Horeb with his rod. Moses struck it, and water poured out. Enough for 2 million people and all their livestock. Water from a stone. Let that settle in your mind. The God who split the sea now split a rock, and life flowed out. Then came Sinai, Mount Sinai, Horeb, the mountain of God, the very same mountain where Moses had seen the burning bush. God had told him at the bush, "When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall serve God on this mountain." And here they were, the promise fulfilled. But Sinai was not a gentle welcome. Exodus chapter 19, verses 16 through 19. On the morning of the 3rd day, there was thunder and lightning and a thick cloud on the mountain. The sound of a trumpet, growing louder and louder, the whole mountain trembled violently. Smoke billowed up from it like smoke from a furnace, because the Lord descended on it in fire. The ground shook. The people shook. Moses himself was trembling. Hebrews chapter 12, verse 20. One tells us, Moses said, "I am terrified and trembling." God spoke from the fire. He spoke to the entire nation directly, not through a prophet, not through a priest. His voice came from the mountain, and every man, woman, and child heard it. He gave the 10 commandments. "You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself a carved image. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. Honor your father and mother. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness. You shall not covet." Exodus chapter 20. These were not suggestions. These were the terms of a covenant between God and his people. The voice was so terrifying that the people backed away from the mountain. Exodus chapter 20 verse 19, they said to Moses, "You speak with us, and we will listen. But do not let God speak with us, lest we die." They had spent 400 years crying out for God to show up. And when he showed up, they could not handle the weight of his presence. There is a lesson in that. Be careful what you ask for. The God of deliverance is also the God of holiness, and holiness is not tame. Moses went up the mountain. He was gone for 40 days and 40 nights. 40 days in the presence of God, receiving the law, receiving the instructions for the tabernacle, the priestly garments, the sacrificial system, the entire framework of worship that would define Israel as a nation. Everything detailed, everything specific, everything pointing to something greater. But at the bottom of the mountain, the people grew restless. Moses was gone too long. They did not know what happened to him. And they went to Aaron, the same Aaron who had thrown down his rod before Pharaoh, the same Aaron who had watched God destroy Egypt, plague by plague. They said to him, Exodus chapter 32 verse 1, "Make us gods who shall go before us. As for this Moses, the man who brought us up from the land of Egypt, we do not know what has become of him." And Aaron, to his everlasting shame, said yes. He collected their gold earrings, he melted them down, and he fashioned a golden calf, in the shadow of the mountain where God was speaking, with the smoke of God's presence still rising above them. They built an idol and bowed before it and said, "These are your gods, O Israel, who brought you up out of the land of Egypt." The same gold the Egyptians had given them on the night of the Exodus, plundered from an empire god, had broken for their freedom. They melted into the shape of a cow and worshipped it. God told Moses what was happening below. He said, "Go down, for your people have corrupted themselves." Moses descended the mountain, carrying 2 tablets of stone, inscribed by the finger of God himself. He heard the noise of the camp before he saw it, singing, shouting. When he came close enough to see the calf and the dancing, his anger burned hot. He threw the tablets to the ground, and they shattered at the foot of the mountain. The covenant, written in God's own hand, broken to pieces before it could even be ratified. Moses burned the golden calf. He ground it to powder. He scattered it on the water and made the people drink it. Then he stood at the gate of the camp and said, "Whoever is on the Lord's side, come to me." The sons of Levi gathered to him, and judgment fell on the camp that day. 3,000 people died. The cost of idolatry is not theoretical. It is real and it is heavy. But here is the part that breaks my heart and rebuilds it at the same time. Moses went back up the mountain. He went before God and he pleaded. Exodus chapter 32 verse 32. "If you will forgive their sin, but if not, blot me out of the book you have written." Moses was willing to be erased from God's record to save the people who had just betrayed God to his face. That is intercession. That is love that costs everything. And God relented. He did not destroy them. He wrote the commandments again on 2 new tablets. He gave instructions for the tabernacle to be built, a dwelling place where his presence would live among the people. And when the tabernacle was finally completed, when every curtain and lampstand and altar was in place, the glory of the Lord filled it. Exodus chapter 40 verse 34. The cloud covered the tent of meeting, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. Moses himself could not enter because the glory was too thick, too heavy, too overwhelming. God was no longer just the God who spoke from fire on a mountaintop. He was the God who lived in the middle of the camp, He was with them, in the tent, in the cloud, in the fire by night, among the people who had failed him, betrayed him, and complained against him at every turn. That is grace. Before the cross, before the New Testament, before the word grace was ever preached in a church, God showed it in a desert to a people who did not deserve it. Let me walk you through what you just witnessed. A baby in a basket floating on a river that was supposed to be his grave. That baby grew into a prince who ate at the table of the man trying to destroy his people. That prince became a murderer, a fugitive, a shepherd in the wilderness, forgotten by everyone except God. And then a voice from a burning bush called his name and turned a broken man into the greatest deliverer the world has ever known. A nation of slaves who had been beaten, degraded, and silenced for 400 years watched as God dismantled the most powerful empire on earth. Plague by plague, God by God, the Nile bled, the sky went dark, the firstborn fell. And when it was over, the slaves walked out carrying the gold of their oppressors on their backs. They walked through the sea on dry ground. They watched the army that chased them drown behind them. They sang on the other side with voices that had been silenced for centuries. They failed in the wilderness. They complained. They doubted. They built a golden calf at the foot of the very mountain where God was speaking to their leader. And even then, even in their worst moment, God did not abandon them. He judged them, He disciplined them, but He did not leave them. He wrote the commandments again. He built His dwelling place in the middle of their camp, and His glory filled the tabernacle so completely that no one could stand in its presence. Every step of this story was orchestrated. Every moment was on time. The 400 years of slavery that forged a people strong enough to survive the wilderness. The birth of Moses at exactly the right moment, placed in the house of Pharaoh to learn the ways of the enemy. The burning bush appearing after 40 years in the desert, exactly when Moses was ready to hear from God. The 10 plagues falling in exactly the right order, each one dismantling a specific pillar of Egyptian power and religion. The sea parting at exactly the right second when the people had nowhere else to turn but forward. Nothing was accidental. Nothing was coincidence. Nothing was late. And nothing was wasted. Not even the suffering. Especially not the suffering. God uses everything. The tears water the seeds of deliverance. Now let me talk to you directly, because this is not ancient history. This is the story of a people who were told they were worthless. A people who were stripped of their names, their language, their homeland. A people who worked for centuries under the whip with no wages and no rights. A people who cried out to God and wondered if He heard them. If any of that sounds familiar, it should. The book of Exodus is not just a story about what happened 3,000 years ago. It is a mirror, and if you look into it honestly, you will see your own face looking back. God heard the cry of the Hebrews. Exodus chapter 2 verse 24 says, God heard their groaning, and God remembered His covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. He did not forget. He does not forget. And if you are in a season right now where you feel forgotten, where you feel like the silence of heaven means God is not paying attention, I need you to hear this. He hears you. He sees you. He knows your suffering, and He is already moving, even when you cannot see it. The same God who broke the chains of Egypt breaks the chains of today. The same God who made a way through the sea makes a way through every impossible situation. The same God who fed His people manna in the desert will provide for you in your wilderness. He has not changed. He will not change. And if he could deliver 2 million people from the grip of the most powerful empire on earth, he can deliver you from whatever is holding you down. Subscribe to this channel because we are going to keep bringing the Bible to life like this. Every story, every book, told like a movie, not a lecture. Share this video with someone who has never seen Exodus this way. Drop a comment and tell me which scene hit you the hardest. Was it the baby in the basket? Was it the burning bush? Was it the night the firstborn fell? Was it the sea splitting open? Tell me in the comments. I want to hear from you. And now, let us close the way we should. Father God, we thank you for the truth of your word. We thank you that the book of Exodus is not a fairy tale. It is a testimony that you see the oppressed, that you hear the cries of the brokenhearted, that you remember your promises across generations. Lord, we ask you to awaken every person watching this to the truth of who they are in your eyes. Protect the truth seekers, strengthen the weary, open the eyes of those who have been told a version of history that left them out. Let the fire that burned on Sinai burn in every heart that hears this message, and let every chain that has been carried too long fall off today. We claim freedom in your name. We claim identity in your name. We claim purpose in your name. In the mighty, unchanging, ever-faithful name of the God who said, I am WHOIM. Amen. Walk in truth. You are free.